Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at finding trig values given a point that the terminal side of an angle goes through. So far we've really worked with triangles, and now we're going to expand it on an angle that's in the Cartesian plane. So for our first example, we're going to find the 6 trig functions. Remember, sine, cosine, tangent, secant, cosecant, cotangent, associated with the angle whose terminal side passes through the point -3, 4. So the first thing we're going to do is plot it. And what we do, so -3, 4 is in quadrant 2. And once we've plotted that point, we draw the line from the origin to that point, and that's going to be the terminal side of our angle. Now it doesn't say which angle it is, because our angle could be this guy here. It could be this guy here. I could go around 20 times and then go to it. So the angle doesn't actually matter. What matters is the point that the terminal side goes through. Okay, so what we do then is after we've drawn our angle, or the terminal side of our angle rather, we're then going to draw a vertical line to the x-axis. So since our point is in quadrant 2, we're going to draw the line down, and I have it in black, so I'll outline it again, down to the x-axis. If my angle was in quadrant, say 3 or 4, then I draw my line up to the vertical axis. But it's always a vertical line, and it's always to the x-axis. And then we have a triangle, and what we do is we use this angle here that I have kind of pointed out as the angle that we're looking at. So that's going to be our theta. Right. And then we just have to remember our x's and y's, which part of that triangle is it? So the x is -3, so that's the horizontal part. The y is 4, that's our vertical part. Okay, so we're going to be looking at that triangle. Then we have to find the hypotenuse. So to find the hypotenuse, we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. So remember that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So c is the square root of a squared plus b squared. Now remember, even though our leg in quotes is a negative number, whenever I square it, it becomes positive. So -3 squared is +9. If you're going to use your calculator for it, remember that a calculator will always do order of operations. So if in your calculator you type this, you are telling the calculator to square the 3 and then multiply by -1. What you want is this, which is +9. So be really careful with your negatives. Remember that when you square a negative, you're going to get a positive. Okay, so you got to be careful with those parentheses, or just don't even include it. Okay, that negative is only there to tell you you're in quadrant 2. Okay, so if we do that out, we should get 5. So C is 5. And then again, just to reiterate, we're going to use the angle that's inside the triangle that is near the origin. Okay. So for the 6 trig functions, we'll start with sine, which is opposite over hypotenuse. So remember, opposite is the y, which is the 4. The hypotenuse we just talked about is the 5. So sine of the theta of the angle is 4/5. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, which was the -3 over 5. And again, you can put the negative in the numerator or off to the side. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that's going to be 4 over -3, which is -4/3. Next, cosecant, hypotenuse over opposite. 5/4, remember that's the reciprocal of sine. Secant, hypotenuse over adjacent, that's the reciprocal of cosine. And then cotangent, adjacent over opposite, that's the reciprocal of tangent. Okay, so depending on what quadrant we're in, our x's and or our y's could be negative, and that's going to affect our trig functions. So since cosine has to do with the adjacent, which is the x value, it's going to be negative. Same thing with tangent. My x is negative, my y is positive, so the ratio of those is going to be negative. Okay, so once you get out of quadrant 1, you start having negative values thrown in here. So let's try another one. Now we're looking for the trig values of the angle whose terminal side goes through -5, -12. So now both x and y are negative, and we're in quadrant 3. And again, I'm going to draw a vertical line to the x-axis. And I have my right angle here. And again, the angle that I'm interested in is the one that's up against the origin. So the first thing we have to do is find the hypotenuse. And if we do it correctly, we should get 13. Again, remember your hypotenuse is the longest side, so make sure that your C or your R or your H, whatever you want to call the hypotenuse, is bigger than both your X and Y. So sine, again, is opposite over hypotenuse. So my opposite is my vertical side, which is my Y, which is my -12. And my hypotenuse is 13. So -12 over 13. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. My adjacent is my horizontal side, which is my x, which is my -5. So I have -5 over 13. Again, the hypotenuse being 13. And then next is tangent, opposite over adjacent. So again, opposite is -12, adjacent's -5. The double negatives cancel, and I'm left with a +12 over 5. So as I think I've mentioned before, tangent is the same thing as the slope. It's the opposite over adjacent, which happens to be, in our case, y over x. And since we're going through the origin, that is also the slope. And if I look, my line has a positive slope. My tangent is positive. So hopefully that makes sense. In our previous example, we were in quadrant 3, and tangent was negative, and our line was in fact decreasing. The other 3, again, are just reciprocals of the first 3. So cosecant's the reciprocal of sine, so it should be -13 over 12. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine, so it should be -13 over 5. And lastly, cotangent's the reciprocal of tangent, so it should be 5 over 12. Okay. And let's do one more. So now we've got the point 24, -7. That's in quadrant 4. Again, we're going to look at the hypotenuse. So I plug it in, and I should be getting 25. So I'm going to draw this picture a little bigger for a minute. So we have our right angle here, and this is the angle that we're concerning ourselves with, the one that's up against the origin. So opposite is our vertical, which is our y, and adjacent is our horizontal, which is our x. And then we just found the hypotenuse. Okay, so that's the triangle that we're concerning ourselves with. So sine, opposite over hypotenuse, we should be getting -7 over 25. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and we should be getting 24 over 25. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that's -7 over 24. And then again, the other 3 are just the reciprocals, so cosecant should be reciprocal of sine. Secant should be reciprocal of cosine. And lastly, cotangent should be the reciprocal of tangent. Okay, so again, once you've drawn your point, connect it to the origin, draw a vertical line from that point to the x-axis, whether it's up or down, depends on what quadrant you're in. And then the angle that you're concerned with is the angle of the triangle that's against the origin. And then just remember that the opposite is the vertical side of the triangle, so that is the y value. The adjacent is the x-axis, So that's going to be your x value. Okay, so try it out and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.